Tonight's upload is brought to you by our patrons from the Patreon page. That's Cecilia Spears, Hawaii, Carl Leakins, Catherine McClear, Sean Campbell, Iron Alexa, Allison Sibe, Ryan Woodward, TikTok12, Bree, Bonanza Jellybean, and Kai Antez. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel through Patreon. And if anybody listening right now enjoys the content of the 80 Slasher Librarian YouTube channel and would like to help keep it going and growing for a long time to come, then click the link in the description below and sign up on Patreon for as low as $2 to $5 per month. You get some great rewards depending on the tier you select, such as the $2 tier gets you the early access content, the $5 tier gets you the early access plus a free ebook emailed to you every 3 months, and every 12 months you get a free gift from the merch store. There's also a $15 tier that gets you a free gift from the merch store every 6 months, a free ebook every 3 months, and you can appear on the podcast and voice a character in an audiobook narration once per month. So there's many choices to choose from. Just click the Patreon link in the description below and check it out. Child's Play 2, The Novelization. Chapter 21. Andy watched Chucky stretch out just a bit more, trying to beat Andy's hand to the knife. The doll's weight suddenly shifted off him, and Andy rolled to the side, sending Chucky flying off. As fast as he could, Andy turned around on his belly and crawled to the whirring knife. He grabbed it.
"Got it,"
he said, but Chucky wrapped himself around Andy's ankles and started yanking him backward. "Why fight it, Andy? You and me were meant for each other, kiddo. We're gonna be very close." He gave Andy a tug that made the boy's cheek scrape the gritty ground. "In fact, we're gonna be fucking inseparable." Andy grunted and twisted as he was hauled back toward Chucky. He yelled, screamed at Chucky, trying to kick his legs free. He jabbed at Chucky with the knife, but Chucky dodged the blade. Andy felt it hit something, a bit of cloth around the doll's sleeve. But right after the slice, Chucky's hand shot out so fast. He grabbed the blade, and as if taking the toy from him, Chucky yanked the knife away from Andy. "Thanks, pal. This is gonna come in handy." Andy screamed. In the darkness of the cellar, Andy could see only a slight glow, a bit of reflection from Chucky's grinning cheeks. Chucky laughed and then raised the knife over Andy, muttering something. "I can't move," Andy thought. He tried wriggling left and right, but he couldn't move at all. Chucky kept muttering strange words, words that scared Andy. Then a light came on, the light from the top of the stairs. Chucky froze. The glow was behind him, and some of the light shone on his hair bright red. "Shit," he hissed. "Andy!" It was Phil. "Andy, what in the hell is going on down there?" Chucky let the knife fall to the ground right next to Andy's head, and then he jumped off him. "He's gonna get Phil," Andy thought. "He's gonna get Phil." Andy sat up and heard the stairs creak. "No," he wanted to say, but he was breathing too hard, just trying to get air. Another step, another creak, and then finally,
"Chucky's here. Don't come down!"
Andy yelled. Another step, another creak. Andy saw Phil's legs and then the man's hand holding on to the railing. "What the? Andy, get up here now! Don't make me come down and get you!" Andy ran to the stairs. "I can get up," he thought, "with Phil. I'll get up and get away with Phil. We'll lock the door and—" As he got near the bottom of the stairs, he saw Chucky, just below the stairs, moving around, hiding something. A broom! Chucky was doing something to the end of the broom, breaking something off.
"No!"
Andy yelled. "Andy, what the hell are you doing? Get up here!" Phil took another step down, and then in the cracks of light falling through the steps, Chucky was there, holding the broom. It had no bristles. It just had a jagged edge like a spear, Andy thought. "It's just like a spear." Phil took another step. "Young man, now you are really gonna get it." Chucky jabbed up with the broom while Andy watched.
"No!"
Andy screamed. "What the—" Phil started to say. The broom shot up between the steps, right between Phil's legs. Phil screamed. "Good shot, eh, sport?" Chucky said. Phil collapsed. He fell like a balloon losing air. He just tumbled forward to the side, grabbing at the railing. Andy saw his head hit a step. He heard a loud crack. "Great shot," Chucky said. Phil then fell off to the side, down toward the cement floor. Andy backed up. One of Phil's feet was caught between the steps, and he hung from the side upside down. "Chucky's gonna get him," Andy thought. "Chucky will get him unless I do something." Chucky stepped out into the light, right in front of Phil. Andy turned and looked at the blade, whirring away, even quieter now though. Chucky stepped right up to Phil's upside-down face. A line of blood traveled down Phil's leg, onto his chest, down his neck, across his face and lips. "How's it hanging, Phil?" said Chucky. Andy looked at the knife. Phil started to say something. He believes me now, Andy thought. Phil's foot came loose, and he fell head first to the ground. "Phil? Andy?" Andy looked up to the top of the stairs. He saw Joanne and then Kyle hurrying down. Chucky looked at Andy. He grinned and then darted into the shadows of the basement. Joanne hurried down and saw Phil. "God, no!" she said. "Oh, sweet Jesus, no!" She stopped while Kyle grabbed her. Then Joanne pulled away and ran to Phil. Andy backed off. Kyle looked at him, then back to Joanne.
"Don't touch him. I'll call an ambulance,"
Kyle said calmly. Andy stood there. "They think I did it," he realized. "They think I did that to Phil. And Chucky could leap out at them right now because they're not looking for him." Oh God, Phil!" Joanne said. Andy stepped closer. "I have to tell her," he thought. "I have to tell her what happened." Phil, honey." Andy saw Phil open his mouth. A red glob was there. He said something, and the glob bubbled. The red goo got all foamy, and his eyes were open, and then they closed. "Get away! Just get away!" Joanne yelled, seeing Andy next to her. "Get away from me! Get away!" Andy looked in the shadows, near the piles of boxes filled with old clothes, looking for Chucky. But there was no Chucky there. Just Joanne, holding Phil's lifeless head and crying. And then the sirens, the terrible sirens that had always seemed to hurry past his apartment, never stopping, until that day that Aunt Maggie had went out the window. And now the sirens are here. Too late again, he thought. Kyle stepped out of Joanne's way. Joanne roughly pulled open the bottom drawer of Andy's dresser. She scooped out the clothes and stuffed them into the boy's suitcase. She kept crying the entire time, wiping at her eyes, her cheeks.
"Joanne,"
Kyle tried to say, but she knew that she wasn't very good at all the comforting business. But she still felt like she had to try. So Kyle reached out to touch Joanne's arm, but Joanne shrugged away. And then she grabbed the suitcase's zipper and yanked it shut. It caught, jamming halfway closed. She cursed and then pulled harder, but it wouldn't budge.
"Joanne,"
Kyle said. It was scary watching the woman like this, filled with grief, but Kyle knew she was also filled with hate for Andy. Joanne stopped, rubbing at her red eyes with two hands. I should have listened to Phil. He knew there was something very wrong with that boy." Joanne looked right at Kyle. "He'd be alive now, if I'd listened to him." It felt awkward, but Kyle put her arm around the woman, and then Joanne just sobbed against her. Kyle tried her best to comfort her.
"Shh. It isn't your fault."
Joanne kept heaving. Kyle stroked her hair, feeling very weird.
"I'm not the comforting type,"
she thought. But who else was there? They had carted Phil off in a body bag, and now Andy was downstairs waiting. Kyle went to the suitcase. She grabbed the zipper.
"I'll take care of this,"
she said. She finally worked the zipper closed and then picked up the bag. She patted Joanne's shoulder and walked out of the room.
"I doubt she'll be getting any more little boys for a while,"
Kyle guessed. Joanne followed Kyle out of the room and down the stairs. When they got to the foyer, Andy was standing there beside Grace Poole of the Children's Crisis Center. He's shaking, Kyle saw, standing there shivering.
The crazy little kid is scared out of his mind,
she thought as she plopped the suitcase down. Grace Poole nodded to Kyle and then turned, a bit uneasily, Kyle thought, to Andy. "Andy, you'll be fine. You'll spend a few days with us at the center, just until we find you another family."
I can't imagine there'll be a long line for that offer,
Kyle thought.
This kid's got one bad track record, and whatever you do, don't let him see one of those dolls.
Grace Poole looked back to Kyle. "We place Kyle with a number of families, and things always seem to work out, don't they, Kyle?" She saw Andy look up at her. The kid looked like a mess. Despite everything, she did feel sorry for him.
He's got some pretty strange stuff going on in his head,
she thought. Kyle picked up the suitcase.
"Sure. Here's your stuff,"
she said while handing the suitcase to Andy. Andy's hand, shaking, reached out for the suitcase. He kept looking at her.
"Waiting for me to say something,"
she was thinking.
"Nice knowing you. Keep your chin up. Watch out for Chucky. Jesus."
"Now come on, Andy," Grace said. "We have to go." She gave Kyle one more smile and then led Andy out the front door. The police car was waiting for them. What a way to get escorted back to the Children's Center. Officer Ginkgo and his man-eating shepherd were on escort duty, just in case the kid goes boingo again. Kyle saw 2 more police cars in the driveway. Indecipherable electronic chatter could be heard through their open windows. Grace and Andy walked to the car, and the boy turned around and looked at Kyle. She made herself smile.
"Good luck, kid,"
she thought. Grace gently guided Andy into the car. Kyle went down to the cellar. It was all lit up now, and the cops were walking back and forth, moving boxes, taking measurements, muttering to each other. As she watched, Kyle was thinking,
"It was still creepy down here, but better than going back upstairs and facing Joanne again."
One of the cops, young, kind of good-looking, turned to her. "We'll be out of your way in a minute here." He had a big leather notebook open. "Did anyone else see the accident? Anyone besides the boy?"
"Accident? Well, that's one way to describe it,"
she thought before finally saying,
"No, no one."
She was facing the stairs, and underneath the stairs, where it was still dark, she saw something, near the back wall, just sticking out a bit into the light. A pair of red sneakers.
"The goddamn doll,"
she thought bitterly. She took a breath, and then she repeated,
"No, no one but Andy."
The cop nodded. "Okay." He looked up at her and gave her a consoling smile. "We're all done then." He turned to the other cop. "Let's go." The other cops shut off their big light, and the cellar returned to its normal, murky gloom. Kyle started to lead them up the stairs to the kitchen, but she stopped. She ran underneath the stairs and grabbed the doll.
"We've had enough of this in the house,"
she thought, and she dragged it upstairs. Chapter 22. She walked out the side door. The cops were getting into their cars, while half the neighbors stood outside watching the show, probably busting their guts to know what was going on. Kyle shook her head and walked to the metal trash can. The wind blew, sending her hair flying backwards. The air smelled good after the dankness of the cellar. She picked up the trash can lid and threw the doll into the can. Then she slammed the lid down flush. The cops got into their patrol cars, probably dreaming of coffee and free donuts. Kyle reached into her back pocket and took out a pack of Marlboros. She dug out a slightly bent cigarette and stuck it in her mouth. The cars pulled away. She lit her cigarettes. She thought,
"I'll kind of miss Phil getting on my case about smoking. At least he cared enough to say something."
She sucked in the smoke and walked over to the swing. The neighbors were still watching, still chattering to themselves. Of course they'll read all about it in the local paper, Kyle was thinking.
Man has bad fall in basement.
She sat down on the swing, her feet dragged against the ground.
I'm too big for swings,
she thought. But still she pushed against the ground and swung back and forth just a bit while she smoked and thought. The swing creaked as she moved, but she still heard a sound from the house. She turned around. It came from Joanne's bedroom, a whirring noise. Then she saw Joanne at the window, at her sewing machine.
God. Well, I guess she's got to do something.
Kyle looked away.
Guess we've all got to do something.
She gave a push with her foot, and she felt something on the ground, something hard. She stopped and leaned forward to look down at the ground. It was a red sneaker, a small red sneaker. She leaned down some more, still on the seat, but close enough so that she could touch the sneaker, pull at it. Her fingers closed around the tip of it. She tugged at it with all of her might. But it didn't budge. It was connected to something buried in the ground, something that held it. She came off her seat and crouched on the ground. She grabbed the shoe with her two hands and pulled, grunting, until it popped out, flew out of the ground. She recognized the body, even covered with dirt. It was another one of those good guy dolls. But this one, its head was all smashed in, and inside the skull she saw the dirt moving, then glistening bodies, writhing inside, disturbed. She screamed and let the good guy doll fall to the ground. She stood up, rubbing her hands on her jeans.
What's going on here? What in the world is going?
She turned slowly, very slowly, to look at the trash can. The lid was still on, but it was slightly ajar. She got up and walked to it ever so slowly, telling herself,
No, this isn't happening. I'm just getting freaked out. It's been a bad night, and
She reached the can. She grabbed the lid. She lifted it, and the trash can was completely empty. She moaned, and then, over the wind and the rustle of the branches, Kyle heard a loud thwop, and then again, thwop! The screen door to the kitchen slapped against its frame, as if the breeze was rattling it, or... She looked up at Joanne, sitting at the window sewing, rocking back and forth, working on her grief. Kyle felt cold.
I should just get out of here. This isn't my problem. I'm just passing through, that's all.
She tried to tell herself. She saw Joanne by the window, still rocking. Kyle yelled up to her.
Joanne!
And then even louder.
Joanne!
When she realized that Joanne couldn't hear her, Kyle knew that she would have to go inside the house. Through the back door, thinking,
I don't want to do this. It's not my damn problem.
the kitchen was quiet. She heard Joanne at the sewing machine.
She's okay.
She thought.
Everything's fine. Chucky, I can't believe I'm thinking about him as if he were real.
Then she told herself.
It's because he is real. As real as you and I. And that means Andy isn't crazy.
Out of the kitchen now and down the hall. It was dark. She kept wondering, did Joanne shut off all the lights? The only light came from upstairs. She was going to call Joanne's name again, except the sound of it, here, would be too terrifying, and worse. If he was in here, if the little bastard was in the house, he'd know she was here too. Kyle wasn't ready for that. She stopped by the hall closet. She opened it, always keeping her eyes looking forward, into the darkness of the foyer and the living room. The door opened. For a minute she held her breath. She thought he could be in here. But it was still quiet. She reached up, pushing aside an old tackle box, and then digging under a backpack. She dug to the very corner of the closet shelf, where she found her knife. She pulled it down and pressed the latch. The blade slid open, almost too noisily. It gleamed, catching whatever light there was in the hall. She had taken that knife everywhere. Some of her foster parents had not been too nice. Some of the dads didn't just want to play softball. The knife made her feel better. Now she started walking again. She held the knife in front of her, a beacon. She turned and went up the stairs. The sewing machine whirred on, clearer, constant. And she thought,
There's something odd about that.
The knife went up the steps first, leading her. Halfway up, some light from Joanne's room spilled onto the blue carpet. He's not here, Kyle told herself. The doll. Chucky has left. Oh God, probably gone for Andy. We'll have to get help. Get someone to go to the center and... Something rolled toward her. To-dump, down the stairs, small and round. It hit her feet, a spool of thread. That's strange, she thought. A spool of thread? She kept moving up the stairs, past her room, past Andy's old room, right to Joanne's room.
Joanne?
She said. Kyle saw her hunched over her machine, rocking back and forth with the pedal, back and forth, sewing. Kyle took a step into the room. Something scratched at the window. A branch from a big sycamore, the one with the swing.
Joanne!
She said again. Kyle wondered why she wouldn't talk.
Is she that destroyed? Was she made that crazy by the death? She's lost it. In which case, she's not going to be able to deal with the idea of Chucky too well. And they'll never believe me. They'll think I'm nuts, just like Andy.
She thought.
Joanne?
She said again. Kyle was now close enough to touch the woman's shoulder. Tap her to make her stop all that damn sewing. Kyle looked down. She wasn't sewing anything.
Joe?
She tapped her again, harder this time, and Joanne's foot slipped off the pedal. Kyle saw that Joanne's hand was, what, tied to the wheel? Another tap, and Joanne tilted to the side and looked up at Kyle. Kyle screamed and staggered backward. Joanne's face was covered with thread, crisscrossed with thread, all over her face, around her neck, and one eye was held permanently open by the coils of thread.
Oh, God, no. Oh, please, no.
Kyle said. The sewing machine ground to a halt. Kyle just moaned no. Something moved behind her. And she thought,
Of course. Of course Chucky's still here. He's been playing games with me.
She turned around in time to see the bedspread rise up, as if it were hiding a ghost. And then a hole was ripped in the spread. Kyle staggered backward, bumping the mummy of Joanne. And then Chucky leaped out at her.
The knife! You've got the knife!
She thought, but Kyle was much too slow in getting up. Chucky hit her hard and grabbed her around the neck.
No!
She said, but then she felt his little doll arm start to squeeze her neck, and his mouth...
It moved. It's human.
His mouth was right at her neck, chopping at her like a mad dog. She fell back to the wall, brushing past the mummy Joanne, whose one eye watched her. She hit something, a lamp. It crashed to the floor. She felt Chucky's teeth bite down on some of her skin. His other hand held her knife down. She tried to force her hand up, to bring the knife up to Chucky, but she couldn't move it. She couldn't believe he could be that strong. It felt so hopeless. She staggered again and then fell to her knees on top of shards of the broken lamp. Then she felt the knife move, not toward Chucky, but toward her own face. She watched it move slowly toward her face, even though she was pushing as hard as she could the other way. She felt the broken shards at her knees, digging in and cutting to the bone. She reached down with her free hand and picked up a jagged chunk of the lamp.
You bastard!
She hissed and swung the chunk against the doll's head. It made a great cracking noise and the doll flew off her. As it flew away, it ripped the switchblade from her hands. She rubbed her throat and coughed, but then she scanned the room.
Where is he? He's so damn small. He could be anywhere.
She thought. She forced herself to stand while she watched the bed, the table, the chair, any place where Chucky could hide. Flopped over to one side, dead Joanne watched her every move.
He's still gotta be here. He's gonna jump out, just like he did last time. I know it. I know it. I know it.
She edged her way to the bed, moving to the door, snapping her head around repeatedly, checking for those little red sneakers, that striped t-shirt.
He's got the knife. The little creep has the knife.
She told herself. She circled the bed, keeping her legs away from the bottom, away from the dark places where he could hide.
Maybe I hurt him. Maybe he got hurt bad, and I'll be able to get out.
She hoped, but the curtains moved. They flapped slowly, sleepily, once, twice, but then they lay still. She felt the breeze. It was just the wind. She turned from the curtain, thinking,
I almost got tricked. I must keep looking. All the time.
She moved against the wall, and the wall disappeared, and she fell backward, into the closet. Something brushed against her head. A hanger tumbled to the floor. She pushed herself off the clothes and out of the closet. She ran to the door and then looked into the hall.
He could be waiting for me there.
She knew, but there was no one there. The curtain flapped again, and she turned with lightning speed. Just the wind, she thought. She backed into the hall, but something caught her feet, tripping her. Her arms went out, too late, to break her fall, and she tumbled backward onto the hallway floor. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been chapters 21 and 22 of Child's Play 2, the novelization by Matthew J. Costello. What can I say about these two chapters? First off, great job, Cecilia Spears and Bonanza Jellybean, for your roles as Andy and Kyle. But I mean, come on, we all know what tonight was about, right? How's it hanging, Phil? One of the best lines Chucky's ever muttered. And that look of realization in Phil's face when he figures out everything that Andy's been saying was true. I always love that part of the movie. And then, of course, the sewing. We knew the sewing machine scene was coming, which in the book, I feel a lot worse for Joanne than I do in the movie. Because book Joanne was just so much sweeter and really wanted to make it work, you know. In the movie, it just seemed like her and Phil both didn't really want to try. Not sad to see Phil go. Sad to see Joanne go. Happy now that Kyle, is finally, just like in the movie, realizing everything that Andy said was true. Kind of gets her wanting to protect him more. And we all know what's coming up next. As long as it keeps going by the movie, which, I mean, it is a novelization, so that's what it's going to do. We know that Kyle and Chucky have a little bit of a car ride coming up, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. What's going through Kyle's head and Chucky's head during that car ride. And, the dialogue back and forth, since some of the dialogue has been different in the book than the movie. Hope you guys are enjoying this book so far. Hope you enjoyed these two chapters. I'll be back very soon with more of Child's Play 2, the novelization. Looking forward to it. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and how's it hanging, Phil? Have a good night, everybody. See you next time.